Welcome back to Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Joining me today, again, as I always do, is the former University of Detroit Mercy head coach, Chris Colin. And down in Naples, Florida, the UDM broadcaster and John Losi. We have done this now for 3 weeks, and we'll spend some time doing it the rest of the time. We're going to have a number of conversations. On this show, it's going to be a little bit of conversation with high school coaches. John and I are going to spend some time talking about their reaction to the seeding program. And we did get a chance to spend some time talking, kind of finishing up the MIAA with Brett Wetzel at Adrian and Jake DeCola at Albion. A little bit about the MIAA in relationship to the school. The league is getting better, certainly from top to bottom, and it will be interesting to see how far they go. That said, as I look out my window earlier today, it's snowing on the ground. So my first question to all three of us, but mostly to you two, is it too early to be playing lacrosse in February if you don't have an inside facility?
Chris?
This is a function of kind of the haves and the have-nots. The haves who have indoor facilities and maybe a little bit more the win-loss thing is important. And they want a full week of preparation, where I think even when I was playing in the 90s, we started much later and we had a lot of midweek games. And college coaches, we've that was a discussion every year in the IMCLA. Do we push the season back and force kind of that midweek situation, because lacrosse is meant to be played in better weather? And really, it came down to the folks, most of us who didn't have it kind of wanted it, but I think, we all want to get those games against those good opponents, and they want to play every Saturday on the Saturday and spend a full week or 4 days at least to make it a Tuesday, Saturday, and kind of control the schedule. So, the good news is a lot of investment has been made from, Hope College all the way to even when you play at Ohio State, that turf is heated. There's good and bad, but I'd like it to start later. I always wanted it to start later, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
I think artificial turf has certainly made the difference, right?
And heated artificial turf is great.
Yeah, I mean, from a college perspective, I mean, the college season, especially Division I, is all based around championship weekend, right? And so, you're locked into, I mean, you've got no room. If you are dying on that vine of saying we got to have it on championship weekend and the holiday weekend, then we are where we are, right? I mean, the game in my mind stands, by itself, and you don't need, I mean, that's my opinion, right? But I get it. But I'm down here in Florida, and this is their first week for high school, right? I mean, and Georgia started as well. So it just seems like, our sport, the way it's structured in terms of the timing of the season, it just makes it so hard, makes it so difficult.
It reminds me a little bit about the seeding conversation we had last week. When the weather is great, we're all for it. When there's snow on the ground, we don't want it. Chris, we're going to talk a little bit about UD. Obviously, Detroit has had its struggles at 0-2. Michigan went down to North Carolina and found a little bit of a bump in the road at 1-1 for the most part. And talk a little bit about, Chris, UDM and Charlie Hess. And they're playing a very difficult schedule, but that helps and hurts. Do you see positives there? They haven't gotten run out of the building. They've been at least somewhat close scores.
Yeah, no, and I think whether it's even if you look at Michigan going and getting kind of bit by North Carolina, and they played pretty well at times. I watched that game. I didn't get to watch all of the Marquette game. I watched parts of it. As long as you're in a growth mindset, these early games don't matter. You want to get into your conference and you want to be playing well at the right time. So whether it's Michigan or Ohio State or whatever, these conference games are what really matters, and playing your best towards the end and playing your best on championship weekend is the best, or your conference tournament. You want to be best for that. So, in U of D, they're going down playing Ohio State the same day. You're going to get that kind of outcome. You go up to Marquette, who kind of had a rough game against Michigan, which you would have expected. They practice in a dome. It's a tough dome to play in. It's not heated, so you've got this very cold place that you're shielded from the wind and from the snow. But you're still in a very weird environment that you get there, you get off a bus and you go, and that group is just learning, and Charlie is learning, and everyone's learning, and as long as they're thinking about for the future and for the conference and still growing and working on getting incrementally better, it's a positive no matter what happens playing those games. So I saw a lot of good things from what I saw, and they're going to continue to learn and grow and fill spots, and that's what this early season's about. It's not really about winning is easy, but winning can you can win a couple games and kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit too. So as long as you're learning and growing, it doesn't really matter.
Question: you mentioned that at the first early part of the season it doesn't matter. Yet the MIAA teams, if you talk to all of them across the board, they've all scheduled nationally ranked teams to open their seasons. So
Yeah.
clearly to them it does mean something.
Well, right, and that you do that because you want to schedule your tough opponents because you want to learn, right? And you don't get better. Some of these folks, you don't want to have. I would love to go these teams that go into the Carrier Dome and you go play Ohio State, you go play Michigan, and you go do stuff like that. It's really a smart move because that's the best of the best, and everything's going to slow down. Guys are going to be about the same size of you in your conference. The turnovers are different. Everything's a little bit different when you get in and start playing opponents at your same level. So I think it's great that the MIAA guys are getting those games like that because, you go in and you never know. You also could go in and have a great day and maybe win one, right? And you see things like that happening early on with teams that, oh, wow, this score looked a little weird. We saw it in football with Notre Dame and Northern Illinois, right? There's a lot that can happen, and teams can look completely different early on and how they look at the end. So it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So,
okay. So if it becomes important to the MIAA to schedule up, you kind of mentioned that it's, it doesn't really matter. Is there would you be different in philosophy between Division I and Division III because of that parameter?
No, I think it's great. I mean, the fact that they're getting those games, it's all about experience for the kids, right? Like, going. I watched Cleveland State play Notre Dame, and I thought Cleveland State looked great. I know the score was crazy score differential, but those kids stuck in there, and you could see them working through the game and working through their sets and trying to get better. And I think that's going to pay dividends later on for them. So. I think that's if you have the respect of those programs that are traditionally a little bit better, and your kids can go in and have class and learn from it. Great, that's great. I think that you can learn a lot more than trying to schedule a cupcake. And that was always my philosophy too. You don't need to go in and don't be afraid of a few early season losses. That'll help you at the end when it really counts.
John, we watched Northwood this past week. We opened with them in the first show. We talked to their coaches. They went down to Quincy. I watched the game. It was 21-13, so they've got some offense defensively. Yeah. And Chris, you can weigh in on this. I was a little disappointed in the way they played and watching it on TV, or at least in this case, watching it on streaming. And again, I'm not a professional, but it didn't look as good as some of the MIAA play. Maybe it's early, maybe it's rough, and that's maybe an unfair criticism. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's you got a brand new team as well. I mean, coming together as a team, I think makes a difference. I think, let's see how they look mid-season, right? And I think you can say that to a lot of these teams. I mean, really going back to what we were just talking about, I think the big thing for me scheduling those games, and I'll get back to that, but it's extremely important for the University of Detroit Mercies and the Cleveland States to be able to play these high-end Division I teams from a recruiting perspective, right? I mean, the ability to say you're playing D1 because, I mean, there's this whole fixation out there, and this will probably translate into what we're doing later about, oh, I got to play D1, I got to play D1, and you're getting these kids the opportunity, and for them to play Queens and to kind of go through that schedule, it's not the same as being able to say I played against Notre Dame or I scrimmaged against Notre Dame or played at Ohio State. So, but I think collectively, when you look at the MIAA and you look at Northwood, and it's going to take some time. I mean, it's going to take some time for sure.
My comments on Northwood, and I want this to be a positive, and again, I lived this in year one as an assistant coach at Detroit Mercy. Um, they're freshmen and sophomores. They're JVs going against varsities. They're 18-year-olds going against 22-year-olds. I thought they looked for what it is, and as early as they are, as not with as little experience as they have, they need to just continue to grow and take their lumps as they did. And I tons of positives. They scored a lot of goals. Their defense will get better. They've got a good goalie that will make saves, and they had to deal with travel for the first time and things like that. So it's a good start. You got to start somewhere, and as long as those kids all know what they can kind of galvanize themselves through those situations, they're going to be in really good shape. It's a bunch of younger guys versus a bunch of older guys. I mean, it is what it is. So, well, Greg, I agree with you at kind of where the level was. I think they're in a really good place to start.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's going to take time. I mean, I think, not to uncover something to go a little deeper into, but I mean, let's think about the fundamentals of these younger kids that are coming up and getting to college, not having, a ton of fundamentals. I mean, we see it all the time. Chris, you've seen it a ton in the summer. Greg, you've seen it, I mean, more and more, we've got less fundamentally skilled kids that are good enough and athletic enough and are starring at their school, wherever they are, to go and play, at a D3, and I'll talk about the NAIA as well, that just don't have the fundamentals either.
One of the things that I wanted to just briefly talk about, any thoughts on where the NAIA is? Because they kind of gotten lost. Concordia shuts down at the end of the year. There are programs in a number of places, Lawrence Tech and all the rest of it, and Siena Heights, and they don't seem to be getting a lot of the press. Now, part of it is because I think that the MIAA, as an example, has got 2 or 3 or 4 teams that are really very good in a regional level, and a couple maybe nationally. And John, I just wondered if when you see that kind of play, it's another place to play. It certainly hurt the club programs like Michigan State and some of the other programs that are around. So, any thoughts on the NAIA?
I mean, I think I got a lot of thoughts about it. I mean, number one, you look at the state of Michigan, and if you include Concordia, we've got 6 teams that are probably in the top 20 of all the NAIA. And so I think it's important for the state of Michigan. I look at, I know Brian Seaman down at Indiana Tech pretty well. And he's tried to build a consistent winner there. And so you look at some of these Midwest teams, and yes, I know number one, and really the top 2 teams. You got Kaiser down here in Florida. What's interesting about this, I found this out today, is that John Tedesco's nephew is the head coach now down here at Kaiser. Yep. His name is Jeff Desco. So, but I think any avenue for kids to go and play that love the game and get an education, I'm all for it. I think the NIA should get a little bit more attention. So on that premise, I'd say for sure, I think they need to, and try to maybe market themselves a little bit better.
I think it's a great experience. I mean, I have a few kids that I really like that, I mean, are wonderful kids getting a great education at University of Michigan, Dearborn. Those coaches are some of the most dedicated lacrosse rats, and I say that
they have to be. Right, they have to be.
Right. I mean, they're totally into the kids and into the programs. And you take a look at Lawrence Tech, how many successful Lawrence Tech grads are there in the area? They've got Marianne Nutzler as their athletic director. She's, a lacrosse juggernaut. She's won a couple national championships on the girls' side. She's one of the best people around.
Linus, Madonna. I mean,
I mean, there's a lot of good experience, and if you want to go and get educated and build community and get better in lacrosse and learn as a human being, there's a lot of great options and I've seen a lot of really good kids, make great friendships, have great experiences, have those 1-goal games and 3-goal games that are really exciting. And the level gets better and better. And there's some of the, better kids that I've seen in the area that could have gone, low level Division I, but because there were great packages and great majors available, they went to the Lawrence Techs and the U of M Dearborns.
And also, just to jump in, I mean, the other thing too is that, there are kids that don't want that, your entire life is around lacrosse in college, right? There's that
Right.
balance. And so, I mean, to do that, as you both know, you got to be, it's your life, right? And
Right.
so, for kids to say, you know what, I love the game, I want to play, but I don't want it to be my whole life, having more options towards that, and club's a great option as well. It makes it easier, that transition, especially for freshmen going into a college setting, to be able to have that continuity and team building and all those things. It's just I'm a big proponent of it.
I do need to tell you about an apocalypse of high school sports, and it was yesterday. And it was yesterday for me. I hired a nutritionist for a high school team,
Wow. Wow.
and it's a sort of a I don't know how to get out of explain it, but somebody talked to me about obviously we understand nutrition, that it's important part of the premise, and last year when I got where I've got to where I coach at Fenton now, we're feeding the kids after school before games because they obviously don't have anything to eat, and we do a good job of it. We've got parents that raise money, but I looked at what we were eating, and you could just see sugar highs and things that go with it. So we now have a full-time nutritionist,
Right.
and that's just going to somebody we can call to help us understand what it is that we should be giving them in various situations. We already have a trainer that works with us, and now we have a nutritionist. This is a high school team.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, Greg, we didn't have that much budget for it, and I had to shop really hard. But we had a guy who catered for. He does all the food for the Lions, and he does a couple Tigers too, and he actually cooks all their food for them. And he did a lot of our travel meals and things like that because it makes a huge difference.
And
You know,
the other thing too is, Greg, the ability to have access to someone like that for the kids to teach them. I mean,
right.
thinking bigger picture, the more they can learn about nutrition and what to eat and what not to eat, I mean, that's gold.
On that note, what's funny is I was just with doing a training with Joey Norton, who's committed to Rutgers, and I was like, okay, where'd you go eat? I'm expecting him to hit all the greasy places that I ate at and things like that on a visit, thinking that's what it was about. No, they ate very healthy and so things are changing and that's more important to kids and they're healthier and smarter than they've ever been with that stuff. So it's not they don't want McDonald's before practice either. So
A couple of quick notes on the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coach Association. We want to be able to get some of their information out. A brand new format this year for coaches. If you're listening to this, we're going to end up having a annual meeting the same day as the state finals. This year it happens to be on Friday, so we're going to have a meet and greet and pass out some of the awards about 3 o'clock for I think a 5 or 5:30 championship game, and then be able to go from the stadium go from a room in the stadium, obviously at the University of Michigan. We're going to turn around and have the All-American and All-State, much like the All-State meeting. They're going to be separate and they're going to be done virtually, so we don't spend 3 hours on a Sunday when we all can probably be with our families. And then the state's been really nice enough to allow us to have the opportunity to honor our Hall of Fame this year. We've got Doug Sharp from Spring Lake, who had a long career in Western Michigan. And that I think will be a really nice honor. And then one of the things we're going to do for the All-Americans, then we've been reduced in size because it turns out we're one team less. There's a team that bailed in Riverview. So we're now down to 20 All-Americans, but we're going to put some video together for them so that when you're at the game, you'll get a chance to see the Hall of Fame honor for Doug Sharp, and then you'll get a chance to see all of the film from the 20 All-Americans. I think that'll be a really nice addition to our championship at the University of Michigan, which will be I guess the first Sunday or second, no, Friday, first Friday
Yeah.
of June. So that'll be a nice addition. And then I also just briefly wanted to mention that we'll be doing some work with the National Interscholastic Lacrosse Coaches Association. Joe Barcarella from in New York is going to carry this, and we're going to try and flesh out a little bit of what we're doing. And I mentioned that next week we'll have a feature with Brian Effinger on some of the NFHS rules as well as some of the collegiate rules. So if you're watching and why things are a little bit, one of the things that's really true, and you guys can talk to this a little bit briefly, is that the rules between pro and college and high school are miles of thousands apart. But in every sport, they're starting to consolidate those rules. So the jump from one sport to another, all rules for the most part are made for safety, but they're doing some things to make it a little more congruent so that it's easier for guys when they're jumping to the next level. And I think that's really good. Brian will be with us next week to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think anytime if you can get consistency, I mean, there's a lot of chaoticness around the sport of lacrosse in general. We've already been talking about it in terms of starting at different times and all the other things that go into it. And so you bring rules. I mean, that's a fundamental, that's a pillar, in recognition of your sport and allowing kids to be able to make that jump and not have any confusion. And think about parents as well, right? I mean, it's about learning, it's about growing the sport and doing it in a consistent manner.
I know it's been very. I've not sat on any rules committee ever, but I've sat through a lot of coaches conventions where we've talked about rules, and I can tell you how thoughtful, from the NCAA standpoint, the people who take the time to do that spend so much time. And we, as coaches, always had a lot of surveys, a lot of input. And when they make a change, it's very, very thoughtful. And I'm sure at the high school level, even more. So I think it's been in good hands for a long time. The people that are on the committee, I think they spend a lot of time on it. So I've always felt very, very, very comfortable when the rules change happens. And when people think about it, the guys that are actually doing the hard work spend a lot of time. So, and a couple of times that I ever had a question, the long-winded response that you would get and the why is very impressive. So I'm glad to hear that they're getting in line. It's always been a good group of people doing it.
After 40 years at both the collegiate and intercollegiate and certainly the high school level of being an official, anybody that's close to me and my family doesn't bring up the idea that referees cheat. Because in 40 years, I can tell you, I've worked with great officials, I've worked with bad officials, I've worked with medium officials, I've worked with officials that are out for lunch. I've been out to lunch on games myself. I've sometimes missed calls that the only guy in the building that missed it was me. But in 40 years of officiating, not one conversation ever came up about evening the score, doubling up, whatever it might be. And in a couple cases towards the end of my career, we actually had the kind of idea where the AD says, "Hey, if you do a good job in the second half, you'll get your check." We walk to the car because we would never. Can you imagine in your regular job somebody saying, "Oh, by the way, if you do a real good job, maybe I'll pay you, maybe I won't." I mean, talk about disrespect, right? And so when you get a little offensive with it, they make sure that they've got a full house for football. They don't want to have the referees walk out the door. But Brian and I'll have that conversation next week. It'll be kind of fun. So that's up next. We're going to have some conversations with Jake DeCola from Albion, and certainly with Brett Wetzel, who's on the bus going to Newport University down in Virginia to open against the number 6 team in the country, Division III. And we got him tonight before he got on the bus. He's going to have to get a good night's sleep, and we'll be back in a second.
I'll never forget the day I nearly died. The only way we found out I had any kind of heart issue was when I went into sudden death. I think unless you are a heart disease patient, you may not know how much work the American Heart Association does behind the scenes to save your life. Since my cardiac arrest, I've watched all 3 of my children grow into adulthood, and I'm still here.
Learn more about the American Heart Association's work at helpheart.org.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is ready? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes. Look at that. Yeah, you didn't even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you got to get it trending.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Let's go.
Can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Hi, welcome back. We're talking to one of our favorite coaches, Brett Wetzel, who is the head coach at Adrian College. And we're talking to you the night before you have to get to bed early to get on a bus to go all the way down to Virginia tomorrow, because you open your season on Saturday against Christopher Newport University. And it's kind of the first start, kind of getting back at it. So maybe talk a little bit about the trip and maybe a little bit about the forecast for this year's team.
Yeah, really excited about the trip coming up. I mean, in 4 short years, this group of seniors has brought us to the point where we went from playing some of the lower level teams in the Midwest, because that's kind of all we could get on the schedule, to now we're starting the year with the number 5 team in the country, and they invited us out. Like there's a lot of positives going on there. So I'm really excited about it. I know we just finished up practice about an hour ago, and the boys are really pumped up and can't wait to get down there. So, I mean, Valentine's Day with the boys. I mean, what could be better, right?
Right.
What could be better? So, really excited about that. I think, like I said, we got a great group of seniors that's been here, kind of leading the charge in terms of turning the program around and getting us back to being a very competitive team. And they've done a great job with that to this point. And coming up here this season, I think we're ready for a really fun but challenging year as well. We've got probably the toughest schedule that has ever been had here at Adrian College, and we're ready for the challenge. We're ready to go face it head on and see what we can do out of league. And then, I mean, we've got one of the most competitive conferences, I think, certainly in the Midwest. And to be able to prepare ourselves with a non-conference schedule that'll test us with some good ups, some good downs, and be able to bounce back come April, I think is going to be pretty fruitful for us. So really excited to see what we're able to do this season.
You started, this is your 8th year. Your overall is 40 and 44, but you kind of inherited less than what you'd expect. You've been great 8 last year. You've done really well the last 4 years as you creep up. Both Hope and Albion and yourself are opening with some pretty tough games on the road. Obviously, Hope had a little bit of a difficult trip last week.
Yeah.
The MIAA is getting better. There's no doubt. Some of those teams, as you're peeking over you're starting to get the recognition, much like some of the Ohio Division III schools. And now you're starting to find national schedules. Does that make your job harder?
No, I think it makes it easier.
Okay.
To be frank with you, I mean, it certainly helps with recruiting. I can tell you that much. I mean, a guy from Detroit Catholic Central doesn't know an Earlham from a Wabash. They know about a Christopher Newport. They know about a John Carroll. They know about an Illinois Wesleyan, like those top teams that are making it to the NCAA tournament every year. They want to play against those teams too, right? So it's certainly helped us in recruiting. We're off to a great start there, and I'm really excited about the work that we've been able to get going there so far this year. But I really do think it makes our job easier. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not tennis coaches. We got to watch film, we got to scout, we got to do all that stuff. But certainly watching the likes of a Christopher Newport has been a lot of fun over the last few days, and I know it's going to be a challenge out in the field for sure. But it's really, in the future, it's going to help us kind of continue the upward trend of where we're at as a program. I mean, you talk about what I inherited was a pretty rough situation here at Adrian 7 years ago, and now we're definitely on the upswing. And it took a couple years of some bad seasons, to say the least, and some bad days, but we got to a point where now, post-COVID here, our recruiting class was awesome, and these seniors have really done a great job, and they've earned the opportunity to play a top 5 team and to play a really tough schedule. And from the likes of the recruits we're talking with and that we have committed already, I mean, they're excited about the opportunity to play similar teams. So I think it definitely makes our job a little bit easier.
You've got an unbelievably proactive administration towards athletics, certainly at Adrian. That's also got to help, because it gives you the resources and the opportunities that maybe make it a little easier to find the road to success. I think, is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I mean, Coach Hibbard and myself. Coach Hibbard is my new assistant. He's been doing a great job with the recruiting so far this year and helping out the defense. And I mean, President Docking. I mean, President Docking. I mean, he actually had Coach and myself out for lunch this past fall. I mean, just to talk, see how things were going, see where we were at. I mean, we're not a national championship level team, and he's taken the time to do that and see where our program's at, see how he can help, and see if there's anything he can do for us. I mean, I think that's awesome. It's definitely a very proactive administration that wants to be successful with athletics. And I think that's why you're seeing Adrian is kind of not in the mix with some of those other schools that, are talking about financial troubles and issues and all that stuff. We've been doing a nice job, steady job with recruiting and sports and all that. So that's been really, I think, you talk about that proactive approach. I think I mean, heck, there are a lot of other schools that are coming and visiting us to see how we're doing things with our athletics and how we're, adding sports so much and continuing to upgrade facilities and whatnot. So I think President Dawkins done a great job over 15 years, and we're lucky to be able to collaborate with them and work with them on some of those additions and changes.
Lived in Lake Placid for a long time. I know you're a Potsdam kid, so that Central New York certainly has a different way of approaching, a very much different way than around here, and obviously much like Long Island. Did you think you'd be here 8 years? Do you think when you took the job, did you think you'd still be around 8 years later?
So to be honest with you, when I took my first job out of college at Albion under DeCola, I thought I'd only be out there 2 or 3 years and then find my way back home to New York and be coaching up in New York maybe. But here I am 15, 16 years later and, bought a house and got a dog and doing the whole deal. So, it's been a fun experience working with these Michigan guys and working with the younger kids too, and with our youth camps and working with some of the club teams in the area. Like, it's been a lot of fun. These Michigan guys love lacrosse and they want to learn, and it's really fun when you find those guys that are just hungry to learn more and see more and watch more and just want to continue to get better. Those are the guys that we want here at Adrian, and those are the guys that we've been kind of working with our rebuild here over the last few years.
Last question. You've got a great group of seniors who've been there. They've done a great job pushing you. What do they have to do this year to be successful on the field with a record? And obviously the rest of it takes care of itself, but is it better defense? Is it a little more offense? You scored 179 goals last year. You got a good goalie coming back. What do you have to do as a team? What do you try to work towards, and what do you got to hang your hat on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all facets, to be honest with you. Certainly the number one thing for us, I think, would be more consistency at the faceoff. We got a couple guys there that we like, brought in a really talented freshman that we like. I think just figuring that piece out instead of, who's hot today, let's go see what can happen. I think for us, the biggest thing is going to be finding that consistency there. If we're able to find that consistency, win ourselves 5, 6, 7 more possessions a game, I think that's going to lead to more goals for us. I think that's going to lead to less goals for the opposition. I think that's our biggest key, and that group of seniors, having a guy like Mike Jonas, become a little bit more of a playmaker, big goal scorer for us a couple years ago. Now, transition maybe more of an assist type role. Big guy like Cam Reed, just named a captain this year, staying out of the box a little bit more, being a little more disciplined with his stick in terms of approaches and things like that. Sam Spangler holding it down in the back of the cage. I mean, he's just had a great career, just named a captain for the first time as well. I know, it's nice to have a goaltender in the back there to kind of bail you out from time to time as a defenseman myself. So he's been just real lucky to have him for the last 4 years. So a few pieces there where we can get better. We've definitely identified those, and those guys are ready to kind of step up, test themselves this weekend, and then learn from every game we play this year. Learn from every game and try to get just a little bit better before each next opponent.
Joe Spangler's doing pretty well. He's only 22 saves away from being the all-time save leader at Adrian, so that says something for your career.
Absolutely. I mean, Sam's been awesome. He's been a confidant for me. When days are tough or times are tough, he's the guy to kind of talk to, and he's always got that good. I was talking to our trainer today. He's always got those good vibes, and he's always happy to be in there, and he's had a great career. And I know Kevin Lerg over at Beloit really owns that wins record, but Sam has definitely earned his spot there in the record book for sure. And Mike Jonas isn't too far away from that all-time points record either. So just really excited for these guys to kind of go out, not just on a high note individually and set some records, and that's going to be fun. That's going to be great, and we're going to celebrate that for those guys. But they've been wanting that championship game appearance for the last few years, and that's definitely our goal, is to make that appearance in that championship game and see what we can do against Hope, Albion, maybe Calvin this year. Who knows? I mean, they had a tight one last year with Albion, so a lot of competition in our league, and our guys are just really excited about the opportunity.
Last question. I know I said this is the last question, but one of the things we've noticed, and maybe I'm just kind of get a thought from you, the sport seems to be getting faster. And there seems to be smaller guys coming into the sport in sort of for a while there, that 5, 6 years ago, that wasn't true. You had to be 6'3" and you had to be able. The sport seems to be getting faster at all levels. And I think part of it relates to guys getting touches in the summertime a lot more than they might get otherwise. But we're seeing a lot more speed. And if you don't have speedy defensemen, with the speed that's coming off of some of these smaller attacks, it's really cool to see a kid 6'6" playing defense. It's also really cool to see a kid 5'6" dance around him and score to the corner. Do you see speed as the new element in college?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always kind of been there. I mean, I remember growing up back in my day, it was, the fastest game on 2 feet, right?
Right.
That was always what they billed it as and called it. I mean, now, you talk about big defensemen. I mean, we've got a couple big guys down there. Like that's nice to have, but I'll tell you what, a couple of two of the best LSMs that we're probably going to face this year are, 5'7", 160 pounds, and just love to run around and create havoc and find double teams and find the ground balls. I mean, this guy we're going to face this weekend is like that, returning All-American. I mean, they're the speed element of the game, I think, particularly on the defensive end, is something that is trending forward, because guys want to play fast, teams want to play fast. That's how we want to play. We want to get up and down, and I don't care if we have 3 poles ahead of the ball. We want 3 poles to be going down the field and trying to push some offense and push some transition. We talk about that quite a bit. So I mean, that is something that I think needs to come back. I think that's what made this a very exciting game back, whatever it was, 20, 30 years ago when I was, growing up watching the game. I think we're starting to see it come back, and I'm really excited about that. I think we kind of, before the shot clock got into place, things started to slow down. It was a lot more about the big bodies, like you were saying. Now with the shot clock in place, I think playing fast and getting up and down is a top priority for all teams.
I won't mention age, but I go back 40 or 50 years, so leave that one alone from an inside. So listen, have a very safe trip down to Virginia, and hopefully a very successful one. And hopefully we'll keep you along. We'll spend some time with you along the trail as we move our show forward. And Brandon, as always, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Greg. Love it. Have a great season out there in the commentary booth.
Welcome back. Getting a chance to talk to one of our favorite coaches, Albion head coach Jake DeCola. Jake, you're been practicing for a couple of weeks. We're stopping in and having some conversations with some of the MIAA coaches. You're one of those guys looking at the top of the mountain like you do every year, and you start off the season in Music City Classic, and you're headed south. So talk a little bit about this weekend, and maybe tell us a little bit about the team this year.
Well, we're supposed to be heading down to sunny Nashville, Tennessee, and it looks like it's going to be storming, raining cats and dogs down there. So the weather potentially might be nicer at home, although it'd be colder. So I don't know, maybe we'll get lucky and get down there and get a break from the rain and play a couple of games. So it should be a lot of fun. We've had a couple of scrimmages under our belt, just kind of like trying to learn where we at with our fellas. Learned a lot about ourselves after our first scrimmy. And, the guys have done an excellent job of kind of framing, here's where we are, here's where we think we can kind of get to in a couple of weeks. And, let's keep the conversation of where we want to get to on our mind late in the season. But like right now, we're just worrying about getting a little bit better every day. And I think, we're lucky. We've got a really strong senior group of guys. And they're doing a nice job of kind of leading through some of the difficulties of like starting the season in January and snowstorms. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You did you scrimmage Michigan State club's name? Am I not mistaken?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. Yep.
How did they look? Just curious.
They're good. They're fast. Got some. Yeah, I mean, they're always they look like real similar to some of the D3 teams we'll see. Certainly where they're not going to have as much opportunity to get together and practice all the time. They may be slightly less organized, but whatever they might not have there, they're going to make up for with the occasional, D1 transfer or guy who just wants to stay home and go to a Big Ten school instead of play at a real high level. So they're always going to have a bunch of talent spread out in their crowd of guys. And, they did some really nice things on the draw. They did some really nice things in the goal and had a couple of attack kids that were really strong. I think, certainly our fitness in the middle between the lines is probably a little ahead of them, but, all in all, it was a good test. We were supposed to play Northwood, but they had to drop. They were a little banged up. So we gave a lot of credit to those guys. I called Coach Beals like in 24 hours, 48 hours notice, and he was able to put together a group that was really quite good. I know that he was missing a few of his guys he would have liked to have, but I think we got a lot out of it. Certainly, a much better look than we probably would have got from a banged up D2 team that's trying to roll in their first year.
Okay. You're opening with Shawnee. Am I saying that right?
Sewanee, yeah.
Shawnee, and then Bridgewater College.
Correct.
Those are two pretty solid programs. So you're starting out, I think, on the same level as a lot of the better Division III teams across the country. Nobody's playing cupcakes anymore because you don't get any better beating somebody 20-0. I think that's kind of what you're doing here. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we played an easy game here in the last 3 years. It takes some guidance from our men to really understand what the why is there. Like, why go play a team that is, in a scrimmage light years ahead of you? Why schedule a top 10 team every year? Like, why are we playing opponents that are all going to be regionally ranked in the top 3? Like, what kind of sense does that make? And making sense of that is really important if we want to have kind of the outcomes that we're looking for down the road. Our responses have to kind of make a lot of sense. And I think that's a challenge. Like, I mean, we're talking about a bunch of guys that love sport, love their teammates, but they've been practicing now like 3-something weeks and 20 degrees. And, then playing a really tough game instead of, like you said, a cupcake. Like, everybody wants to win, right, Greg? Like, ultimately, we want to build a team and a really strong culture that isn't going to be deterred when we face something difficult. And if we are any good at the end of the year, we're going to have some difficult challenges if we want to do something with our season. So having some prep on that, I think, is really important, and handling it well is really important too to our success.
Okay. Let's look briefly at the MIAA. Is it a 2-team race? Do you see it being more than a 2-team race this year?
That's a great question. You're really trying to put me on the spot, man.
Well, that's been a tradition for the last 3 or 4 years. You guys have battled back and forth.
The league as a whole has gotten much better.
Yeah.
The top 4. I don't know. It's been the top 4 teams for 3 years in a row. It seems like it's been different, I think, for the last 4 years, every single year for the top 4. So I think that's good for us. It certainly, causes us to have to really do a great job when we get to league games. And, like this year, I don't know. I think, at the top, Hope was picked. Then we were picked 2. They've put together a really good team here in the last few years for sure. So if we're fortunate enough to play for a league title, whoever shakes out for that game, if we were able to get there, will be certainly a great game, for sure.
Your point of the league getting better, we had a chance to talk to Zach Cameron at Alma, and we're starting to hear really good things out of that program. He's got more bodies. He's by himself coaching, but it was a bit of a problem for a couple of years, and I think it's sort of headed in the right direction. And when you're chasing the kind of teams he's chasing in this league, it's a lot of work. But but if the bottom gets better, then the league gets much more opportunity. I think with you and with Hope, I think you guys are starting to look over the the regional mountain and starting to sort of eye that national level kind of program. I don't think that's I don't think that's a secret to anybody. And with that kind of competition, It makes recruiting difficult. It makes recruiting not difficult, but it certainly steps up the process because you're all chasing some of the same guys.
Yeah, I think guys are looking at like what kind of outcomes they want with their college career. I have a guy in my office earlier today that could start and be the best player on many of the teams in our league, and it's not anything except that he's incredibly talented, works his butt off, and would be, a 3-4 year starter anywhere else in the league. And made a decision to come to Albion because he wants to do something great, wants to be a part of something special, and believes that his work that he's put into our program for the last few years has paid off in championships and being a part of an incredible program, getting a great education on top of it. Right. We've been named by the Wall Street Journal the #1 liberal arts education in the state of Michigan 2 years in a row. And so that's like a really cool thing. But, I have the privilege of having this guy on my team, and I'm going to tell you right now, he's about to have an incredible season. And I'm so proud of what we do here that a guy would say, hey, I could go to this place and play every second of every game, and maybe never play for a championship. Or I could go to Albion where I'm going to play for a championship every single year and be part of an incredibly special thing. In this case, have an incredible, season and probably a breakout year as a senior. So I think that's awesome. Those are the things you read about in books, right? That help you want to stay grounded in coaching.
I think we'd be remiss if we don't mention the MIAA is one of the best academic leagues in the country. There's no doubt the institutions in this league are top notch, get unbelievable educations at all of them. And so part of, if you're not getting a scholarship, which is obviously true at the Division III level, you really got to think about where you want to go to school and why as it relates to your career.
Yeah.
And I think there's really differences between those schools. And I think sometimes lacrosse gets pushed in the front of the cart and maybe it needs to be part of the cart.
Yeah. We definitely, Greg, we've had guys that come in and they do a fall and they're incredibly successful in the field. And, there's a really cool couple of places to eat downtown, right? There's a apple orchard, a couple miles away, and then a bunch of cornfields, And so I think kids come here sometimes just for the lacrosse. They want to be a part of something great. And then they get down here and they're like, I want to go to a party with 20,000 kids. I'm like, you can do that. You can drive to state and have a great weekend and catch a basketball game and catch a football game. But I think that the guys that have been typically the most successful here are the guys who have, their priorities in line. They see what we see when we talk about our program, and they see what we offer academically. Those are the guys that stay, do incredibly well in our program. They're usually pretty gifted academically, and they go on and do great things, become doctors and lawyers and, successful parts of life. We've got guys that are, that are vets. And then we have guys that study the business school and give up all that and become teachers. And then, we have guys that come in thinking they're going to be a teacher and turn in business. I've got a guy right now who was a 2-time All-American who's making probably more money in a month than I make in a year. It's great.
Last question. From a coaching perspective, as you sort of lay in bed at night, what is it you think your team has to do collectively to find yourself in that championship game at the end of the year? What kinds of things are you working on, and what are you hoping for that improves?
I hate to answer you like I'm going to, because I'd love to tell you that there's some big secret to what we do.
Okay.
We work on catching and throwing, man.
Okay.
We work on shooting and saving the ball and passing. And
Okay.
I know that sounds not exciting, but we talked about, we have some incredible athletes, man. So I'm gonna tell you right now, we have guys that could be, high level. We just graduated. Timmy Salinas could play at high level D2 college basketball on scholarship. And made academic All-America for us. Right now, actually, he is training for his master's degree, and he's running teams up at Central and loves it. But like that kid could have gone anywhere, done anything. And he chose lacrosse because he loves it, right? He's passionate about it. And we have guys on our roster right now that's the same deal. They're awesome people. They love the sport and they want to, they want to push the team to the next level, whatever that looks like from year to year. But I can tell you, like, we've gotten these guys where they are to All-American status by talking about simple fundamentals every single day.
You pay attention to the small details.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we had a meeting on the field a few days ago. And like, I was like, I don't know that we look like a team that currently today wants to pass the ball well. And I think that, it maybe took me 10 minutes to say that, but that's about like what I was talking about. Like, and the guys were like, what do you mean? Like, we're throwing the ball, right? Like, and I'm like, I don't think I've seen a pass that's been above the shoulders, like in the first 20 minutes of practice at all. And like, sometimes I'm talking about stuff like this, Greg, and the guys look at me like I'm crazy, but I think I'm blessed a little bit to have a group of guys, especially my seniors, that when I'm talking, they're like, we may have some guys that are a little bit like a daze about like, what's Coach Nicola talking about? Like, we haven't dropped a pass yet. And I'm talking about getting the ball up above the shoulders. You know what I mean? And then like, I've got my seniors that are like this locked in, like, yeah, I think he's right. I don't think they're throwing the ball real well today. So like, that's really rewarding for me because then it means that we have a chance to get better by the end of that practice. And like about 15 minutes later, it was cold. I went in and got some hand warmers, came right back out, and it was still arguably not great. But the next drill, every ball was up here, and we were spinning the ball on the offense. I mean, it was probably the best EMO practice we've had all season, hands down. They scored every single time.
It's certainly an inside baseball analogy. If you're not a coach or you're not a player, it sticks up. We all preach the same thing, whether it's second grade all the way through college. So I certainly appreciate that. Listen, I appreciate your time. We wish you the best of luck this season. And
thank you, man.
Hopefully we'll take some time along the season and have another conversation as we closer.
Yeah, I'd love to check in.
Smiles are powerful. They spread joy, laughter, and hope. But not everyone gets a fair chance at a smile. Every 3 minutes, a baby is born with a cleft, making it difficult to talk, hear, eat, and even breathe. In America, most children with clefts receive immediate care, but others around the world may never have access to the surgery they need to thrive. Smile Train is changing that. As the world's largest cleft charity, our sustainable model has sponsored more than 1.5 million smiles. We offer training and financial support to local medical professionals so they can provide life-changing surgery and other essential services at no cost to families.
It's worth it to see these children, to hear the difference that we make. And for me, being born with a cleft lip and palate, knowing what they went through is so life-changing for me. They're not just helping a child, but they're helping a family, a community.
Help us change the world one smile at a time.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye, Dad.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Have fun. Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
Alex is just
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Welcome back, John. We had a really insightful conversation last week about the MHSAA's project and proposal for seating, and we kind of, batched it back and forth on the old table, as it were. And I don't want to get into the logistics part of it, but I had probably 30 phone calls or emails in terms of the discussion, and there's as much confusion now as there was because it was printed in a couple different places. It was printed on Mitten State Line. He actually did a nice his interpretation of it and a sort of a blog and very concise and to the point. We, I think, had a pretty concise and to the point. I was yelled at in a couple places because we made a determination that we hate seating, and I don't know that we ever said that. And then we got some pats on the back because all of a sudden we're supporting seating, which we didn't say that either.
Nope.
So I thought if we talked to a couple of high school coaches and get a sort of an understanding of what they thought, it turns out that in talking with Chuck Vierick from Grand Blanc and certainly Brian and a couple of other coaches, it turns out that they came to the same conclusion we did. It's maybe. I know you spent some time diving into it a little bit more, and it's still surface, and it still hasn't gotten to it. One more quick thing is, Colt Malatinsky got back to me. He kind of wanted me to not bring it out into the public. Well, that's a little late now because he didn't get back to us, but they are making some updates to what the proposal in this discussion, and some of it's coming from what we're talking about, and at least we've started the discussion. So you delve.
Yeah. I mean, it's all you want, right? It's an open dialogue. This isn't, there's not, you put egos aside, put who does what and what it is. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. If the goal is to help the sport and to help the kids, then yes, we're all on the same page. And it is a maybe, right? There's a lot of maybes in there. And a lot of the changes they're going to make is to take the maybes out, because right now it's a mixed bag. And so you pass something that's a mixed bag, you're going to get mixed bag results. So if you want something, to make a difference, then you clean it up and you do it.
Yeah, and the other thing that's got to be thrown into this formula is that the MHSAA is a volunteer organization that every high school belongs to.
Yep.
There's nothing says you have to belong to the organization. Now, you don't play in tournaments, you don't get a chance to play for state championships and all that they offer. But like any organization, it is multifaceted. The MHSAA has a big job in trying to figure out in which direction they go. So Dan Hutchinson, the new associate director for lacrosse, says all the right things, and has got a background as an assistant principal, has got a background as an athletic director, a coach, which I think is terrific, and we'll see if it gets moved in that right direction. At the end of the day, it's the MHSAA choice. They will take some conversation, but it's really hard not to look at that report and have, you mentioned, and I think it's a really good point. Maybe we spend a couple years without it and see where we go from there. So,
no, I mean, what I said about the report to begin with was that it's the best and the most well thought out and put together document I've ever seen come out of the MHSAA. Plain and simple. There's logic behind it. There's reasoning. There's when you can sit and talk about it, right, in a positive way that you want to improve it, it means you accomplish the goal. And I think it's okay to put these things out there, right? I mean, that's what you want to have happen. You want open dialogue. I think the thing with the MHSAA that has been over the years, it's the lack of transparency, right? Yeah. And that's the perception of us out here, and I've had it. But there are other factors, right? I mean, the Coaches Association, which you and I have talked about, I mean, there's a role there that you need to be more cohesive in order to take things to the MHSAA rather than the other way around. So, right. They're a big organization. They got a lot of jobs, and it's a long history. So, I am not saying. I mean, they're showing a lot of good things, and I'm excited to see what can happen.
Well, in looking through the story and background, I'm always interested in knowing what other road may have been taken. And in studying the premise, you and I have had a long conversation about when Howell was the host site for the MHSAA state finals. Okay. As I'm reading down Dan Hutchinson's background, he was just hired a year ago to the MHSAA. The athletic director at Howell High School was Dan Hutchinson.
Really?
I'm not suggesting there's a parallel line between playing at Howell, who having an associate director now who used to be the athletic director, but until we kind of pushed the University of Michigan, that's, I think, a little more than coincidence. Unfortunately, it's a fine enough school. It's central part of the state and all the rest of it. But I always look for those extra rows and him coming from Howell. If I had a fly on the wall, I'd bet $1 to a dime that there was some connection to that process, right?
Yeah, very well could be. Could be. That's you digging in. Greg.
Yeah. Well, anyway, up next is Brian talking a little bit about it. We're going to kind of intersperse some stuff, and as well as Chuck, and not a bunch of time, but we just want to let you hear some coaches have a conversation
That's what everyone
from
wants.
them.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's going to affect everyone differently, right? So everyone is going to have their own opinion. I've talked to a number of teams from, head coaches in Grand Rapids, and they're like, we don't want to have to play, the potential, between two teams that are probably the two favorites potentially to win it in the regionals, right? I mean, it wouldn't happen in any other sport, would it? Maybe, maybe basketball, you're going to see it this year, but so everybody's got a different opinion.
Well, let's see what the coaches have to say and see if they're far off from our opinion.
Yes.
Brian, we've been talking about the seeding program that was out last year that's now being sort of sunlight coming on it. And it's got a variety of thoughts. I just wondered, overall, what's your thought on that? You've read the report from Cole Malatinsky. I just wonder what you thought. And then I got a couple of specific questions.
I think it's an interesting proposal. It's certainly data driven. And I like the fact that after 20 some years that we've done this, right, with the seeding, we're taking a new look at it and saying, is this a possible way to improve the game or improve the growth of the game for that matter?
Now, typically, you've been seeded for most of the years that you've been coaching. And I'll use the other example. I haven't been. So our zone and our region in this side of town with me at Fenton, we get teams from East Grand Rapids coming over. I'm not going to win a regional in the short term as I'm building a program. You, on the other hand, have and I don't want to say the benefit because I think that maybe this is the wrong word, but being seeded is because of success. But you're not going to see Lake Orion, which is a team down the road from you. I just wonder from an equitable standpoint, would you rather see them early or late? And does throwing teams across geography the way they've been doing it help the better teams and hurt the worst teams? I think that would be a simplistic way of looking at it, but is that fair?
I'm gonna take heat for my answer. I think it's 100% fair. Let me give you a couple of things. I think we call them regionals, which indicates that we're looking at a regional geographical area, and to some extent we do. But also, there's no reason if we're in regions that Brother Rice should be playing Anchor Bay. Forget wins, losses, strength of program. That's not a region. I shouldn't be going to Heartland this year. Midland should never come down to, say, Clarkston for a region. All these different things that have happened. Either we call them something else, or we should get set regional championships, or whatever you want to say, brackets. Because right now I don't think we're doing it that way. Also, to your point, Clarkston has benefited strongly from this system. I don't think it's a bad system. I think it was a better system 20 years ago. I think we have to modernize a little bit. I like this proposal. I look into this proposal, and I don't see how it hurts the growth of the game. I certainly think it helps promote it.
Okay, so if we're looking at numbers, we talk about being a new sport. We're 56 years old. It's not a new sport. We talk about it's a growing sport. It's actually not. 5 years ago, we had 129 teams with about 7 or 8, and I want to say 5 or 6 or 7 years. We had 5 or 6 unifications. We now have almost 40. We're at 179 teams. We actually have less kids playing lacrosse. Okay. That indicates to me that after the pandemic, we know the pandemic screwed a lot of federation numbers up from football all the way down to equestrian. So let's put that in perspective. But that being the case, we're still at a 5% loss in terms of numbers. That being the case, wouldn't we promote regional opportunity? Because there's a lot more venom between Lake Orion and Clarkston, certainly between East Grand Rapids. The travel for parents at cross-state type of deal, I don't think there's any question we're always going to have disparaging levels of score, because tell me a sport where that's not the case. It's not the NFL where parity becomes part of the discussion, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have those scores, especially early in the tournament. But that said, I think that one of the things the report says is it talks about regional competition, less travel, less cost. I think that's a real solid factor. I don't think it's an overwhelming process, but thoughts?
So I have a couple there, and I'll say this, as far as the travel is concerned, right? People say travel across. To me, that is what it is, right? We've all signed up for this. The parents, everybody knows going in, it's lacrosse, you're going to get in the car at some point. I will always put that aside, especially if we're talking the playoffs, right? Parents are going to show up, people want to be there. However, I can use Clarkston, Lake Orion. I can use Brother Rice Catholic Central. and let me use Brother Rice Catholic Central. I've been to those games, right, mid-season games, as a fan, as an alumni, as a friend of people who are playing on the team, have kids on the team. Those are electric games. They're packed and they're full. Flip, go across town, go to Lake Orion Clarkston. I beat up on Ron. Ron beats up on me. Sometimes we have blowouts. Sometimes we have overtime games. Those are electric games. We should be having more of those. And if that means Ron and I have to play twice in a year, for those that don't know, Ron, Lake Orion, if we have to play twice in a year, once in our OAA game and once in the playoffs, I don't see how that hurts. At the end of the day, the top 4 teams are going to make the semifinals. I don't see how it hurts to have more competitive games early. God forbid we have, I don't know what, a Brandon Holly and I don't know whom, well, Fenton, right? God forbid we have you two playing for a regional championship. You have, 1,000 people in the stands. There's some electricity going, and maybe somebody else from a neighboring community that doesn't have the support. Well, right now we're talking Brandon Holly, right? Maybe enough kids from Holly show up and say, we want this on our own, and they grow it, and all of a sudden we have a team. Because the way we're doing it now isn't exactly working.
I think of last year, and this is the question. This is before I moved to the report. Yeah. I lost in an unbelievably wonderful high school experience in the regional semis. We had a really good season. We lost 4 times by a goal. We lost in overtime. It was our 5th loss in a regional semifinal. If you're a senior, and this is the question I asked the kids at banquet, I would rather lose in a 1-goal overtime loss in the semis than go to the finals and get beat by 20. Yeah. That's my personal opinion. But here's the point. When we get back to reading this report, if you're going to get the idea that there's going to be some mountain you're going to jump over because of disparaging levels of understanding, it would be hard to read the report and not come up with this term, maybe, because I don't think there's enough compelling evidence. There's good ideas, there's some thoughts, but as you and I have talked about, I think there's as much maybe in this discussion as there is yes, and I don't think we're going to get 93% of the people agreeing or disagreeing, because everybody we talked to is maybe. Is it better? I think it is, but it's not marginally better. It's not incrementally better, but it still does create some of those points that were done in a data-driven proposal, and I think that's the point. I think it's a maybe, and that's why we have to have some discussion and put some light on it.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I would suggest that it wouldn't hurt us as an association. First of all, as an association, right? I have to be tribal, you're tribal, right? I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to look at it through Clarkson's eyes. That's my job. And when I take a step back from that, and I say I've been doing this for a number of years, and I want to see the game grow. I was here when there were 20 teams. You were here when there were 20 teams, right? So we stand back as a step of pride, and we say, we've been part of this. I don't think it hurts us as an association to look at it and say, okay, MHSAA, let's try this for 2 years. I mean, Cole's been charting, right? Cole was charting this for 3 years behind the scenes.
Right.
Why not try it? Yeah, still some people are going to be upset. That's fine. But if it doesn't work, let's just have the caveat that in 2 years, let's take another vote and go back.
I find it interesting, and I want to end this on this because I think it's a great opportunity. An indigenous sport that came from natives, and you're reflecting and using the term tribal, looking out for each other. Talking about putting those 2 words together is absolutely perfect because that's kind of what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%, 100%, yeah.
All right, well, we'll finish this with saying probably a lot of maybes and a lot more discussion, but at least we had a chance to have that conversation. I do appreciate your time.
Yeah, Nay, thank you and your panel, Chris and John, for everything you guys are doing. Truly, I think in a world where we're all ultra connected and can communicate all the time, I don't know that the lacrosse world is always doing that. So I think this is a great voice.
We're talking with Grand Blanc varsity lacrosse coach Chuck Vierich, and we're going to talk a little bit about the MHSAA's potential proposal for getting rid of seating. Chuck, you've been a very successful coach for a long time. You've been at Grand Blanc. You've established some really good programs at Flint Powers, obviously now at Grand Blanc. And I just wondered, the state is at least talking about removing the seating process, which has been a part of the MHSAA lacrosse family since it started in 2002. And I just wonder if you had any thoughts.
It's kind of an interesting thought process because, I mean, I understand the seating process, why there is seating. It's so that we don't have some of those big guys who have been ranked so high meeting so early on in the playoff system. I get that. And then I also see the taking away of the seeding and going based on demographics. So you don't have certain teams traveling all over the state to host a region, even though they're not really even from the demographic area. So, I mean, it's really a fascinating, interesting conversation topic.
The reason we're having this conversation is we're not sure that a whole lot of high school coaches even know that this is even a potential discussion. Kind of came up at the end of last year as part of it. There are 28 programs in the MHSAA family that don't seed, and there's one that does, and obviously we're part of that. 5 years ago, they tried to take an attempt to go look at maybe seeding some other sports. It's never really gotten there. You have to take away also the prejudice to some extent. Now, I don't blame anybody, but the prejudice if you're a particular coach from this particular district, if you're on the committee, they do a really equitable job of making sure everybody has a good opportunity. But you can also make some arguments that people that have been on that seating committee have been good to themselves, and I'm not so sure I wouldn't do the same if I was part of that program. The away from the human element, and here would be a good test case. You've got teams from Grand Rapids who are coming all the way over to the east side to play in a region when they skip over, at least 4 regions to get here. And I understand you have to have a different region. How do you ever get the teams that are just below that belt in this area to play each other in a regional final, as compared to a team that comes over from Grand Rapids, plays 2 games, and goes home with the trophy? It could be said, the same argument could be said in reverse for Brother Rice working on the other end of things. It's an interesting discussion, and if you get hurt by it, you're against it. If you are not hurt by it, you're for it. I think that's does that seem logical?
No, I mean, I've never sat in on that whole seating meeting. All of a sudden, I just get the blip of it, and I go, okay, this is where we're at, or this is where we're playing, or who's in our regional and everything. I've had questions on it. Like, for instance, one thing that I think would be kind of unique way to do it. I coach football as well. And one thing that I really like is that when the regular season's over, that's when they kind of come out with the playoff bracket, somewhat the seeding for the districts and all that other stuff. So I guess my question is why can't we do maybe a form of that seeding midway through the lacrosse season? Put like a deadline on it in some way, shape, or form, and then say, all right, hey, we've played so many games. These teams have really stood out. Maybe now we look at doing a seeding, or as having everyone say, like, look, this is your home regional. Now, if you qualify based on how well you played, and maybe there's a committee that's set in place, then we reseed, go on that, and then we can go, all right, you've done really well. You kind of earned yourself into that top tier region. Maybe we put you in a region, but now you're over in this region or something like that. I mean,
if the goal of the original seeding is to not eat each other, Lake Orion and Clarkston, Brother Rice, Catholic Central, I get that. East Grand Rapids, Forest Hill Central. If it's not to eat each other to get the best teams to the finals, then it makes complete sense. But we do have some empirical evidence that it is at least stunted some of the growth of other programs, because they look down the schedule. They looked at those regional seedings when we get to that point, and they realize there's no chance they're going to get past either a regional semi or a regional final. And one of the ideas is if you do have some success and get past that regional final, it does help grow the program at the lower levels in your community, because all of a sudden you're being looked at in a different light than, oh, that's right, you're always a second round loser. And it's hard to build that program. And I'm not sure I have an opinion one way or the other, but there is, I think, very definitely 2 different sides of this discussion. And it'll be interesting to see how they come down with it. And if it turns out that the coaches know, maybe they can at some point, sort of weigh in for the discussion.
Well, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I think if they're going to do something like this, they need to pull from a wide range. They need to hear from a lot of other people, because, I mean, I agree. I've been a part of programs where it's been an uphill battle trying to build it and everything. And yeah, there's times where you see some of those seedings and you're like, whoa, that's that's fun and everything. And then I've been on some teams just like recently where we've done some of the right things. We're starting to get ahead of steam. We're starting to kind of get some momentum going our way. And it's like, obviously you want to play the big dogs, the blue bloods, the guys that have been consistently really good, because you're like, all right, I want to see where my program, what we have done, what we built meshes up to it. And it's a fun challenge, but yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm really intrigued to see what the thought processes are. I mean, one second I like the seating, and then the next time, like, ooh, I like the area, getting a chance to play in your area and then move on and everything. I see benefits to both.
So you're like me. It's a very strong maybe.
It's one second I have a conversation and I'm like, oh yeah, I like that. And then there's times I'm like, all right, you know what? I like the other way too. So, I mean, I still think that there's got to be a way to combine a little bit of the both of them to make it a little bit more beneficial.
Something we faced last year. Here's a simple litmus test, and this is where I still don't have an answer to this question, but I'll ask it of you. We play a regional semifinal last year against another team that's very similar to us. We play an unbelievably wonderful game. We go to overtime. We lose. We crack the bar a couple times in overtime. They eventually score, and they go on. It's a great way to end the season because you were fighting for it right to the last second.
Mm-hmm.
The team that we lost to, and if we'd have won, we would have had to face that other team. We'd have gotten beat by 25. So do you want that last game to be a game that is just unbelievably wonderful in your memory, even though you know how hard you played? Or do you want to play one more game and know that you got to play your scrubs by the middle of the second quarter because you're not going to be able to compete with them? And that's kind of where we are right now with a lot of that seeding process. And I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's going to be one that'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those. I understand. I've seen both sides of that penny.
Yeah,
I've seen it where I've dished out the hard loss to someone else, and then I've taken the hard loss and everything. And it's one of those ones where would I love to win big or would I love to lose to a really good team? I don't know.
That's a hard question, though, is it not?
It stings no matter which way you twist it or flip it. I mean, winning is great. Getting a chance to play one of the best and be like, all right, let me throw my hat in the ring and let me see what I got. Or do you lose in a heartbreak fashion and it's like, oh.
Exactly. Well, we appreciate your participation. We're just kind of we're going to talk to several high school coaches around the state just to kind of have this discussion for our second show of the 5th season of Michigan Lacrosse Review. And as always, you're one of the better coaches in the state, and I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Greg.
Well, that was the 3 high school guys, John and Chris. That was Brian Comiscus, obviously from Clarkston, and Chuck Vierick from Grand Blanc. And hopefully their conversation was kind of what we talked about last week was maybe. And we just wanted to thank them for coming on board. And we appreciate you guys being a part of the program. And it was fun.
Thanks so much, Greg.
As always.